Before I get started, let me just very quickly and briefly react to the Lego presentation. Two things. Jürgen, to you, I guess, on behalf of countless future generations, thanks for ensuring a happy childhood. So I think that's a tremendous job, and that's a real purpose. And to the audience, I have bad news and good news for you. The bad news is no product samples as part of this presentation. The good news, in case you're still a little tired after last night, you will not have to cook anything in 40 seconds, okay? Now, purpose of my presentation is growing brands in times of uncertainty. And I think as you followed the presentations yesterday, this whole notion of change and what change means to this industry, I think that's really dominating this event, and I think some of the future presentations today will reflect that same theme. And so let me reflect on this a little bit, what it means for Nestlé. Before I do that, in line with Alex's introduction, here are a few key facts on our company. As you can see, we're a global company with very deep local roots. I think this is very important in this day and age, as being locally connected in the food and beverage business is getting ever more important. You can see that in our factory footprint and also the R&D center footprint, that local connection is something we never gave up when centralization was all the fashion. And I think now it stands us in good stead. Took 151 years to build up this company, and we're very proud taking care of it. And yes, in case you were wondering, that photo on the left-hand side, that's more or less the view from our offices. The one thing we all share at Nestlé, in spite of all that size, is this strong conviction that size alone does not protect you from the winds of change. And hence, in spite of all that size, there is a constant need to evolve, and we're very, very committed to that. And so on the next slide, what I would like to do is take you through some of the elements of change as they apply to our industry. And I'll spend a bit of time on this, basically go from the top left-hand side to the bottom right-hand side. And again, if you feel you rather heard enough of change, sorry for stressing your patience, but I do think it's important. And then it kind of paves the way to some of the case studies and snapshots on how we cope with this change, which I'm going to present towards the end of the presentation. So let's start with the consumer and changing consumer tastes. And I mentioned millennials here, but this is not only about millennials. The one wisdom, I guess, in the consumer goods industry is youth never goes out of fashion. And so what the younger generation does gets copied time and time again by other generations. What you're seeing as the latest fashion in Palo Alto or the Washington Square district in New York or in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or elsewhere, maybe here in Berlin, sooner or later will basically find its way to be copied by other generations and to be copied in other locations. Sooner or later it'll go mainstream. Changing consumer tastes is probably a topic for a whole separate presentation. I'll just focus on three very brief observations. One is, in food and beverage, health is a big part of the equation. And so this whole notion that good food and drink is the single best thing that you can do for yourself for your long-term health outcomes, I think that's spreading. And people get so much more educated about what it means to eat and drink right. I think the internet makes it so much easier to educate yourself about that. And hence, the bar gets constantly raised about product offerings, transparency, what's in there, and also just giving consumers help and advice and support in making the right choices. And I think that fits perfectly with the nutrition, health, and wellness strategy that we have pursued for a long time. Second thing is, I alluded to that at the beginning of the presentation, this resurgence of all things local. 40, 50 years ago, if something was global, by definition, it was cool. And I think that has changed. I think there's a resurgence of all things local. I think in the presentation by Martin Wolf yesterday, you saw that maybe this anti-globalization movement in the 2008-2009 financial crisis was part of that. But I think these days, local brands, local products automatically have a head start when it comes to consumer trust. And I think for global brands, there's an extra mile that you have to go to win that confidence and maintain that confidence. And then the third element, consumers are getting more and more interested in how a product is actually made. What did it take to bring that product to the shelf, make it available? What are the business practices of this company? What's the sustainability approach of this company? And so that requires a whole lot of transparency And at the end of the day, it is no longer sufficient to be the respected quality provider. I think in Facebook terms, you want to be liked by your consumers. So quality is basically taken for granted. You want to be liked, and then people will basically do business with you. Next up, digital opportunities. Again, this would fill a whole separate presentation. We heard about Industry 4.0. Let me focus on two things. One is communication with the consumer, and the other one is e-commerce and fulfillment. Communication. 30, 40 years ago, it was a fairly simple push model. You create content, you basically then select your media depending on what sort of target audience you want to address, and you push out that message. It's a one-way street, and of course you had to define your target segment in ways that hopefully you hit it right. Two things have changed. One is, with the digital age now, there is the opportunity for the first time to really have a real conversation. And then second, that old business school professor dream from the 1970s and 80s of segment of one marketing, really identifying at affordable cost and at scale individual consumers, some of the key attributes that define this consumer, and then talking to this consumer in terms that's relevant to this consumer. I think that's new. Again, it was a pipe dream for a long period of time. It has now become reality. On e-commerce, similar issue. I think in the good old days, the retail shelf was an important barrier to entry. We'll talk about that when we talk about small business. These days, the opportunity to list yourself on the endless shelf with some of the online retailers, or to build your own online fulfillment model, this has made it so much easier to start a business. And by the way, online fulfillment model, every single little antique shop that you're seeing somewhere here in Berlin has that. Okay, it's basically the ability to take an order over the internet, ship it out. That's an online fulfillment model at the very basic start. That gets you into the business for a few £100. Basically, as you go up from there, you make it more efficient, you scale it up. The barrier to entry to get your product to the consumer has all but disappeared. And that leads to that third phenomenon, the rise of small businesses in our industry. My personal estimation is 30, 40 years ago, it was probably just as easy or just as difficult to come up with a new consumer product as it is today. What has changed is that these two powerful barriers to entry, getting listed somewhere, finding shelf space, and then also communicating with the consumer, those were barriers to entry where it took capital to overcome them. Those have disappeared. It is so easy to create online buzz about your products. It is so easy, as I just described from the online fulfillment, to get it out to the consumer. This is what gets small businesses started, and then sooner or later they get the traction and they really get widespread appearance, and then with that, of course, there's plenty of interest from the retail trade to give them shelf space. So I think this is a whole new phenomenon, and collectively, over the last 10 years or so, that other category in most consumer goods has really taken market share. It's reflected in many supermarket shelves where I think those shelves used to be dominated by the 2 or 3 leading suppliers 10 years ago. What you see now, they occupy the center of the aisle, but then basically towards the left and right, you see more and more niche products. Now, that rise and that collective gain of the other market share then gave rise to the radical cost-cutting approach. So if you take this, and if on top of that you throw in some of the deflationary trends that we are seeing in key Western European markets, but also in Japan, as we discussed yesterday, that led to either stagnating or even negative organic growth for quite a few mainstream consumer goods suppliers. And that gave rise to people who basically said, okay, let's take that for granted. Let's not even try to change it, and let's basically extract all the value we can get by cutting as much cost as possible. Once we're done with that, repeat the same thing on a new business and go forward from there. We don't believe in that model. I don't believe it's proven yet in terms of its long-term viability, but again, it's understandable how that approach came about. Stricter regulations, key issue, no longer reserved to just the advanced developed markets, but also these days, in fact, very prevalent in some of the emerging markets, for example, in some Latin American markets. I think prudent regulation can be a win-win for everyone. It just needs to be based on good science And I think harmonization between different country markets, different jurisdictions is very important. If not, it makes things so much more complicated and so much more expensive, especially for multinational consumer goods companies as they're trying to satisfy all these different requirements in different markets. And last but not least, macro uncertainty. History never repeats itself, but sometimes it does rhyme. And this day and age now, almost this decade after the world financial crisis, reminds me personally a little bit of the 1970s, where we see lots of political uncertainty, surprise changes that were not expected before. You see gyrating interest rates, currencies, raw materials prices, and hence navigating in this environment just is more work. And it also reminds me, and I think this applies to most of the audience, when we sort of grew up professionally, it was in the 80s, 90s, the first decade of the 2000s, we grew up in a calmer environment. And so we're rediscovering some of the lost arts, like, for example, hyperinflation accounting, that really are needed to cope with some of this extreme volatility. So all in all, a lot of change. The key message is status quo is not an option. And so let me spend the rest of the presentation then to take you through 4 snapshots. I guess case study would be overselling them, on how we deal with that circumstance. Let's talk first about digital and pet food. And pet food is one of those categories that I think lends itself to digital opportunities. If you're wondering why, well, if you ever tried carrying home a 50-pound bag of dry dog food, you know why. So logistics and convenience is a big part of that. But there's a second element, and that second element is communication again, because almost every pet owner, at some point or another in the pet's life, has a practical question about how to take care of that pet, how to take care of some specific nutritional question. And I think this offers the opportunity to really engage in a dialogue. People are willing to fork over their cell phone number or their their email address to get into a conversation. They're willing to fill in a form about the pet's nutritional history, and hence you start basically engaging a dialogue, and then you can use that for future promotional opportunities. This brand here, Beyond, is one of our leading US pet food brands, and we exploited that big time in both ways, on communication and also on shipping. On communication, we basically started 2 years ago with heavy incentives, but also the offer of advice. We're using some conversation tools, again, no longer one-way street communication. So for example, based on Facebook Messenger. And so with that, basically in 2 years, we've been building up a database of 200,000 contacts. We're answering, even at this early point in the game, about 40,000 questions a year. You get your answer typically in 30 minutes. So again, it really builds up a history of pets, their owners, and that unique history, and that really helps us then to guide the communication going forward. On shipping, take dry dog food again. A typical pack size for one of the Beyond products used to be 3 pounds or 13 pounds. And we realized when we worked with some of the online merchants that that was not really appreciated. One was too small, the other one was too big. So we created a custom-made 4.5 pound bag size that also makes the price comparison against physical shopping so much harder. And it was a wild success, and hence, optimizing the pack size for the digital age, I think really optimizes that entire product group and the brand for digital trade. When you step back from pet food overall, take a look at Nestlé as a group, 5% of our sales are now coming from the digital arena, and that 5% of the sales is growing basically at 3 times the company average rate. Hence, across all different categories, I mean, some of them lend themselves more, some less to digitalization, but this whole notion of optimizing communication and shipping for our products and really embracing digital opportunities is a big deal to us. The way we handle we basically create tools at the central level, and then we'll leave it to the category, we'll leave it to the country markets, how to install those and how to implement those, because the one thing we realized is there is no one-size-fits-all global solution to e-commerce. The way we engage with the internet is very different, especially by region. Some regions it's far more mobile, in others it's more like fixed-based and screen-based. And even within Europe, when you think about the pick-and-click model, in some cases and in other cases having online home shipping direct as the preferred form of distribution, I think there's huge differences, and hence we need to cater to those differences, because at the end of the day, it's the consumer's interest, it's the consumer's will that counts. Next up, lean cuisine. This is an example of product repositioning. And basically, anyone who's shopped in the US for frozen entree, this is one of our core brands in the US. This brand showed strong growth until 2010, and then started to get into a mild decline that actually accelerated through 2015. At that point, we took a deep look, and we were trying to understand where we'd fallen out of favor with the consumer. And we realized that there were two major insights that we had missed earlier. One is this whole notion of, the product specifics, like what do you put into this pack? Frozen food generally has a bit of a bad reputation, but that's not because of frozen. Frozen is actually a very safe, a very convenient way of delivering food. It was mostly about what we put in there, and hence people were asking for more organic food, they were asking for a higher vegetable content, they were asking for a higher protein content, and so we had to do our homework, get back to the drawing board, and really improve the nutritional profile to be more in line with those consumer tastes, and we did all that. The second part was a communications challenge, and basically lean cuisine in the US was perceived as a diet brand at a time when being on a diet permanently had kind of fallen out of favor. And so we used all the communication tools available, again, a lot of it digital, to reposition this brand as what it says here in the headline, and that is a health and wellness partner. And as you can see from the photo, it earned us a few awards. You can see that on the left-hand side. But more importantly, after 5 years of decline, we got back to strong growth in 2016. We clocked more than 7.8%. So pretty significant rebound after 5 years of decline. And 2007 promises that this was not just a one-year kind of success. Next up is Maggi. And this is not so much about the product Maggi, but it's more about a region of the world that often gets overlooked in our industry, and that is sub-Saharan Africa. We do more than 2 billion Swiss francs of business in this region. When you look at the past decade, in spite of all the ups and downs, we have consistently clocked a 10% annual growth rate in that market. This is before acquisition, so this is all organic. And again, when you think about all that happened to this continent, when you think about changing raw materials prices, that is a very, very solid achievement. Now, more importantly, when you look towards the future, when you look at population growth numbers, when you look at some of the economic activity, this region promises big things for the future. When you look at where population growth for the next 40, 50 years is going to come from, most of that is what people call the Indian Ocean Rim. And Africa is a solid 1/3 of that. Hence, that region, if you ignore it, you do it at your own peril. When you do business in that region, you have to adjust your business model in several ways. Let me highlight two. One is there's a very decentralized distribution and retail structure in most of these markets. This is not the sort of market where people go shopping once a week to fill a fridge or pantry, because they may not have a fridge or pantry. And in terms of affordability, they can basically afford what they will consume the next day or two. And the climate also doesn't make it easy to hold food in store. And hence, there's a lot of street vending. Small pack sizes, affordability is a key issue. And we're supporting that not only with the product pack sizes, we are also supporting it by providing tools to these street vendors to actually make a better living with our products and take up our products instead of someone else's products. We call that initiative My Own Business. It basically encourages people to go into street vending to actually cater to these decentralized, local, smaller needs, and it's been very successful. Second thing is a classic story of doing well and doing good at the same time. One of the public health problems in sub-Saharan Africa is micronutrient deficiency. And for a lot of these products that we have on offer there's an easy way, without loading much additional cost into them, to actually address that. So all these micronutrients where overdosing is actually a very remote risk, like vitamins A and C, or zinc and iron, we basically fortified our products. And The nutritionally fortified Maggi bouillon cube, I think, is sort of the poster boy of what we've been doing in this era. Without much additional cost, really offering a product that's superior, that's addressing public health concerns, and we got a lot of recognition, not only from consumers, but also some of the countries where we do business. So again, wonderful region, good promise for the future when it comes to organic growth. We're deeply committed to it. And last off, Nescafé Azera. This product was launched in 2012 in the UK, and it basically, you would probably think this is an oxymoron, it single-handedly created the super premium soluble coffee segment. Super premium soluble coffee segment. This is not your old Nescafé anymore. This is basically a product that's right out there with the best products that you can buy in a coffee shop. And we took basically note of the fact that the UK, which was traditionally a tea drinking country, over the years, over the decades, had evolved into a coffee drinking country, and a coffee drinking country that really loved to buy their coffee in coffee shops. To give you some data, in '95, there were 400 coffee shops in the UK. These days, about 23,000. So this whole notion, you know, of the London professional on the way to work that basically just picks up their fix as they go to the bank, that is no longer just the City of London. That has gone mainstream all over the UK. So we took a step back. We engineered everything that's related to that coffee shop experience into this product. You want crema on top? We give you crema on top with soluble coffee. You want that feeling of sedimented coffee at the bottom as you get it from French press? We give you that. You want it in this packaging so you can take it with you? We have that. The only thing that we couldn't construct into it, as hard as we tried, that unique experience of you're trying to get your coffee, you're late to work, and there's a line in front of you of 10 people, that one we couldn't get in. Everything else we succeeded. Tremendous commercial success, 40 million pounds within 5 years, building up now to this annual level. We're launching this product in 18 European markets by year end. Germany will be next on the list end of this summer. Tremendous price point, and again, this amazing ability to create a whole new segment, which is super premium insoluble coffee. So clearly an innovation that addresses customers' needs and is in line with the times. And that really concludes the presentation. If you're asking, well, what do all of these things have in common? Here's the common thread. Strong brands take investment. And so all of these 4 initiatives and all the different activities that they're required to basically be successful took some investing, whether it's OPEX, CAPEX, even in some cases initial M&A to get us there. We're committed to that because the one thing that we strongly believe in, no matter how uncertain the times are, strong brands are key to our industry. In the branded consumer goods business, you either grow or die. Brands either grow or die, and we are committed to growth. So that's the key message. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Just time for one question. Just before you go, Mark, I mean, obviously, I think what a lot of people will be interested in, and it really fits into your presentation where you're talking about the key importance of your core products, your core business, but obviously things are changing. People are wanting healthy products. People are going to look at recent moves in the US market with Nestlé. Some people will draw the conclusion, whoa, Nestlé, they're getting out of chocolate, or candy, excuse me, getting into healthy products. Would that be overstating it?
I think that would be overstating it because, look, there's a very basic insight. Food is not fuel alone, okay? If it was, you would have had a tablet for breakfast or for dinner last night. And so clearly you didn't. And this whole notion of eating food for a whole lot of different purposes will not go away. So in a sense, providing the pleasure, providing some of the other attributes of food, while at the same time improving the nutritional profile of what we're offering, I think that is a key public health benefit in and for itself. For the company, it also offers tremendous premiumization and differentiation opportunities because in line with the times, I think this awareness of what constitutes a healthier product, I think, is rising, and so we're catering to that.
Right, and global is no longer cool. You heard it from the man himself. Mark, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
The Nestlé story.